everyone, I'm in the process of 3D printing a larger-than-life statue of one of my favorite comic book characters, Magneto. And on the table here are over 44 different parts that I've run off and printed over the past week that I now need to get assembled and see how everything's starting to fit together. And this doesn't even include the huge boots that I went off and printed and assembled in the previous video, which you can find a link up here in the corner if you haven't seen that already. Now, originally, I was gonna wait until I basically had everything printed before I run off and make another video on this, but I'm currently kind of obsessed with this project and getting everything printed and want to see how all of this is coming together. I still need to work out all the details of how I'm going to weld all the parts together. So I'm going to be using, for the most part, a lot of 3D Gloop. And one of the key tools that I've been using is this deburring tool for a lot of the cleanup. That it just really helps clean up a lot of the seams, as well as just all of the areas that's gonna have some elephant foot when you're 3D printing things. I'm trying not to reiterate the exact same video that I posted previously, but again, I'm just kind of obsessed with all of this at the moment and how fun it's been to get all these parts sliced up and ready for printing and just seeing them all come together here. And I just have so many parts that need to be cleaned up for this project. And one cool part about this is, for the most part, I'm using Prusa Slicer to slice up all of the prints, and I'm using their new tree support option. And one thing that I've been seeing is, even though sometimes I've noticed prints have been starting to fail, where supports were failing, the supports would end up catching themselves on the prints and it would print properly for the most part. Some areas would still kind of be screwed up and I'm probably gonna have to do a little bit of cleanup or maybe reprinting a few parts here and there, but for the most part, they're looking really good. Also, one other tip that I mentioned previously was when I was using Lubin 3D to slice up all of the files, so you can actually scale that up, hollow it out, and create all these printable parts that you can run off and 3D print in your slicer of choice and printers of choice. But one thing that was really cool about that is that it could actually tag all of the parts for you with exactly, you know, like a naming convention as well as a part number. However, one thing that I'm quickly realizing while working on these parts is that sometimes the prints are really clear with the actual how it indented and made those call outs on what those parts were. So where it hasn't, I've been using a Sharpie and going back over those prints to help further identify them, because as you can see here, I have a ton of prints that I now need to sort out and start getting assembled, and it's just kind of a confusing process when you can't read those labels. So mid-recording here, I ended up cleaning off the desk and was about to start the assembly process and found a whole nother box full of parts. So there are 10 additional printed parts that I completely forgot about. These look like they're all different thigh pieces here that I've got cleaned up and labeled here so that I can start getting them assembled. And perfect timing for that as well, because I just received a huge bottle of this mega gloop of the 3D Gloop that I ordered from the 3D Gloop team to help get everything fully assembled here. They also sent me this crazy syringe thing that they're testing out that they wanted to see if I'd be interested in using. Yeah, of course I'd be interested in trying this out and seeing if I could squeeze some gloop into some tight fitting spaces. Also, as I'm going through this never-ending cleanup process here of all of these different prints, I wanted to say thank you to Elegoo for sponsoring this video series of me creating this entire Magneto statue. I ended up printing these different parts across 5 different Elegoo 3D printers: the Elegoo Neptune 2S, the Elegoo Neptune X, the Neptune 3 Pro, the Neptune 3 Plus, and the Neptune 3 Max. Now, all these parts were scaled down so that I could fit them more easily across all of these 3D printers, and even on the larger machines, I was able to pair these up and print 2 at a time in some cases. It just really helped alleviate some of the process when it came to printing and having to worry about print failures. And if I did run into a failure, it was only going to be a smaller file that was needed to be reprinted versus the entire thing. And best part is the print quality off of these are looking absolutely amazing with that 0.28 layer height setting that I went with on the prints. Not to mention, I printed all of these in the Elegoo PLA and some of them in their newer colors. I do have an exception to this. I went off and printed the neck piece here in the Polymaker. It's a purple, like a silky purple PLA that I had on hand that I thought was just gonna be the perfect option. I didn't have a whole heck of a lot left as well of this, so I figured I'd try and use it up for the project. Elegoo, we're missing purple in this whole mix up here. I need a purple PLA. Please get on that so I can start printing some cool purple things with your filament. All right, so I've got the right arm all glued together, and what was great was I ended up being able to print off the actual forearm piece here and hand in just 2 parts. But here you can see here with the right arm with the forearm, that just slides right into place. That's really, really cool. And then here is the fist. That can go up on top. It almost looks like he's flexing here and making a muscle. All right, so I do have a seam that runs along the arm, and I want to see if I can actually apply some of the gloop there using this syringe method thing that they passed along to me to try out and see how it might work. I think it's going in there. It's seeping into that crack there. It's kind of just leaking everywhere. Definitely glad I'm wearing some gloves when doing this here. Okay, first test using this large syringe with the 3D gloop in inserting it into the seams worked really well in my opinion. I ended up using just a small amount of 3D gloop compared to the normal amount that I use to just, apply it to glue some parts together. And I was able to get directly into those seams there. Obviously, I've made a little bit of a mess around the outside edges of the print, but it's helped fill in the gap of some of those parts and also made this much more sturdy. I can already feel how well held together this is just by using that. I'm definitely gonna be looking online, seeing if I can leak something like this to you guys, so if you wanted to try this out for yourself. So as I've been working with this in Lubin, there are 2 different, actually I think there's 3 different options. Actually, there's probably more options when it comes to the pegs that you can print off and insert that'll automatically generate. And a few tips that I've found. So I'm using the rectangular pegs as well as the diamond peg. I'll post on screen what those actual terms are from the software. The diamond ones seem to be a little bit easier to insert and get into the prints. I did end up cutting off the tips of them. I also ended up, just to get them to print better or without failing, I should say, because the tips are very small, I ended up shaving off the top portion of some of those so it would better have a larger seating area on the build plate. Now the rectangular pegs here, those are also kind of a pain to get properly inserted. So I basically scaled these down to I think 95% scale, and they more or less now fit into most of the openings for the appropriate prints that are gonna correspond with these. Now, one thing that I've done with a few of the thigh parts here is to just help make sure that they're extra strong and durable is I've used that same soldering iron that has a temperature control on it that I was showing off in a previous video and running that along the seams with the knife bit, digging it into the seam to help join the 2 parts together. Also, make sure you're wearing a respirator when you're doing anything like this. You don't want to be breathing in all of the melted fumes from the plastic. So this is the left thigh, and I basically have the lower and upper portion of the thigh that need to be joined together, and I'm debating on not actually sealing this up so I can leave it open and hollow in case I want to actually fill this with foam, or if I want to burrow a hole through this for one of the support beams. I'm not entirely sure. I think I might just hot glue it for the moment, just so I can get the full effect of this, all being assembled here together. At least that way I'd be able to more easily take it apart with just some hot glue. All right, hopefully that's good. And here are the 61 3D printed parts assembled in their own individual body parts laid out on the table. I am so excited to get this thing assembled and seeing how tall it potentially will be. I also brought in a scale so that we can try and weigh the individual parts to get a more accurate representation of just exactly what we're dealing with here. And we have Magneto's buns here, which weigh 5 pounds, 3 ounces. All right, apologies about the audio and more than likely the visual as well, but I'm gonna be trying to get this thing assembled using a little bit of duct tape. And yeah, I just put a big old dent right into that thigh. This is just ridiculous. And here it is, somewhat assembled here. I've already knocked this thing over a handful of times. There's a whole bunch of damaged spots that I'm now gonna have to go in and try and repair, but this thing is looking absolutely massive. I'm 6 feet tall and it comes up to my armpits here at the waist, and I still have the torso and the head to print for this, along with the base that's gonna raise it up another at least foot or so. Also, here's the ginormous arms that go with this as well. This thing is gonna be absolutely amazing once it's finished, and hopefully my ceilings are high enough here to actually support this project. Let's do a quick stat recap about the project as well. So far, I've printed 637 hours, which comes out to 26 and a half days of print time just for these 61 parts. This is also 25 pounds of 3D printed parts, which is just insane, and a total cost so far in filament of $264, which is great because I still have the torso and the heads to print along with the base. I'm not even sure if I'm gonna have enough filament for all of those base prints. Now, I did also wanna say a big thank you to all my Patreon supporters for your continued support of me making content here on the interwebs. If you're interested in things like my 3D printer settings, you can find those over in my Patreon. So I still have a lot to do on this project and excited to share more with it for you all later here in the month. Right now, I'm gonna be focusing on printing the torso and starting to figure out how exactly I'm gonna support this thing here, since he's supposed to be floating in air. And let me know if you guys have any ideas on how best I could attach the limbs together to the main body components. I like the idea of these being able to be detachable, so I'm thinking maybe magnets in here, but let me know what you guys think. Maybe there's a better option that I could look into for this. I'd seriously need some strong magnets to be able to mold into place here so that they're not popping off randomly. Hey, thanks so much for watching it all, and I'll see you next time.